All right, so you're playing a green-white deck in Standard. You want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so sure. This is basically a reboot of the deck that Ruben won a Pro Tour with, and you're basically looking to just curve out with a bunch of creatures and planeswalkers that are basically good enough on curve. But there's a component of it where you can start snowballing into the late game. You have a lot of really powerful top decks. You have some really powerful synergies, and you can use cards like Oath of Nissa to basically find them. Oath of Nissa really is just like Ponder in this deck.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just really sweet. It's good at curving out and beating down your opponent, but you can also play a long game with some nice tricks.
Very cool. So you want to tell us a little bit about your mana base and kind of how the curve in? I see a lot of double white and as well as double green.
Yeah, so the mana is actually pretty good. The main reason for that is Oath of Nissa. So there's a lot of double green, double white cards. A lot of them are planeswalkers though. Oath of Nissa, not only does it allow you to cast your planeswalkers for any type of mana, but Oath of Nissa also means that if you need mana of a specific kind, like for Quarantine Field or Archangel Avacyn, Oath of Nissa is going to help you find that land. So it's a 2-color deck, which makes things a little easier. You know, we have 4 fortified villages, 4 canopy vistas, and then just rounding out with a bunch of basics. But there's also 2 Westvale Abbeys, which is a really powerful card. It's a little bit of a corner case scenario whether you actually get to flip it or not. It's only going to happen once every like 30 games or something like that. But essentially, it's this really powerful 6-drop that you don't have to like draw an opening hand and say, oh, this is like a 6-card hand because I got this 6-drop. I'm never going to be able to play.
That makes sense.
So that kind of highlights one of the advantages of this deck is cards like Westvale Abbey, Walking Ballista, Quarantine Field. These are cards that you can play them for a low cost. You know, if you just draw them in your opening hand, you're not going to say, oh, my deck is so clunky. But when you get to the late game and you have these really powerful mana sinks, and so you get to play these expensive casting cost cards without actually paying the price of drawing like a 6-drop, you know?
Yes.
So also, if you ever flip Westvale Abbey, like Mardu vehicles, they can never, ever, ever kill it. Yeah, everything they have is just like destroy or whatever. It's this big life linker, so it's just absolutely insane.
All right, and so are there any unique like interactions that are specifically cool in this deck?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few of them. Walking Ballista, one of the new cards, is really, really powerful. And you have Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, and Rishkar, Pima Renegade that are going to be able to put extra counters on it. Walking Ballista by itself, it's really powerful, but it's a little inefficient. So having a way to just incidentally get more counters on it is really powerful. Also with Walking Ballista, it plays really well with Archangel Avacyn. Being able to flip Avacyn on demand is a great way to surprise your opponent, get a bunch of value, and potentially win the game. And with Walking Ballista, we had seen this sort of thing with Hangerback Walker in seasons past, but with Walking Ballista, the nice thing you can do is if your Walking Ballista is already in play, you can end of turn flash in your Avacyn and still end of turn shoot something down with Walking Ballista so you kill it. So your opponent may be tapped out, you can flash in your Avacyn, untap and have it flip immediately, which is a lot faster than what you could do with Hangerback Walker, because you would have to like main phase your Avacyn and then cast your Hangerback Walker for 0, which you can still do with Walking Ballista, but having that extra flexibility of killing your Walking Ballista at instant speed is pretty powerful. It also does a lot against just a lot of decks. Like there's a lot of X1s. Marduk Vehicles has some powerful cards like Veteran Motorist, some other X1 creatures, and so Walking Ballista incidentally ends up being really powerful against them. It also helps make you safe against the Saheeli Felidar Guardian combo. Usually the weakness of this sort of deck is that you don't have a lot of interaction. You end up embedding interaction in your creatures. Like instead of having removal spells, you have a card like Lambhold Pacifist, which is a great 2-mana blocker. But having cards like Walking Ballista and Avacyn able to be creatures that are also removal spells is one of the cornerstones of the deck. A few other interesting things in terms of just like my deck building. I'm playing 3 Heart of Kiran. Basically, I need an answer to Heart of Kiran so it doesn't kill all my planeswalkers. And so the best way for me to do that is just like play my own Heart of Kirans. So I've got some extra 3-power creatures in the deck. I had mentioned Lambhold Pacifist before. Main reason I'm playing Lambhold Pacifist instead of something like Sylvan Advocate is just so that I can crew my Heart of Kiran. And then the one other thing that's probably worth noting about my main deck is my 3 removal spells. I have 2 Quarantine Fields and a Fumigate. Quarantine Field is something that I'm a really big fan of. Like I said before, the vehicles like Heart of Kirin are usually the thing that I have the hardest time dealing with. So I really wanted to have removal spells that could deal with vehicles. So Quarantine Field, in addition to just being a card that I kind of like because it's not particularly efficient at 4 mana, but it's usually good enough. But then if you ever get to cast it for 6 mana, it's just insane. And then Fumigate is the other card that I have. In the past, I'd really liked playing Tragic Arrogance. Fumigate isn't quite as good, but it's pretty decent, and particularly in game 1, a lot of the times the aggro decks, they board into more Planeswalkers post-board, so something like a Sweeper isn't going to be as good against the aggro decks in games 2 and 3. But in game 1, they're usually just kind of cold to Fumigate. Like they have their Heart of Kirins, maybe like 1 or 2 other vehicles, and that's like kind of it, you know? They don't have as many things that are resilient to sweepers. And my deck plays really well with sweepers. I can have 5 mana, maybe I have an Absent and a Fumigate in my hand. I can see how things develop. Sometimes people just deploy creatures and then not attack because they're worried about Absent. But then if I just have a Fumigated set, it's like insane. Also, if I play Gideon on turn 4 and I have Fumigate, even if my opponent has something like a Gideon, I can just Fumigate, the board is clear, I can animate my Gideon, make a new creature, attack theirs. All of a sudden, it's just a completely empty board except for I have a Gideon. So huge advantage. And also some of the decks, like the green-black, the green-black decks with the coiling snake, whatever it's called.
Winding Constrictor.
Winding Constrictor, yeah. Their creatures can just get insanely huge. And flipping an Avacyn, shooting stuff down with Walking Ballista really isn't going to cut it. But those decks are really, really weak to Fumigate. So Fumigate ends up being just a nice way to round things out. I don't have room for a lot of removal spells, so I want to play ones that are basically as high impact as possible.
And I see you've laid out your sideboard nice and beautifully down here.
Yeah, no problem.
So do you want to tell us what cards you have in your sideboard and what matchups they're kind of built against?
Sure. So Heart of Kirin, again, one of the best new cards in Standard. Pretty good against killing my Planeswalkers. So I have 2 natural states just to have an efficient way to answer that. There's some other good artifact removal, but I really wanted to play natural state just because it's the most efficient. I also have 1 Angelic Purge to kind of round things out. Angelic Purge has been a card that I've liked quite a bit. Sometimes I've even played 1 in my main deck with extras in the sideboard because of cards like Nissa making 0/1 plant tokens. Oath of Nissa gives you like a random thing that you can sacrifice also. And sometimes sacrificing one of your own creatures can be an advantage if you're looking to flip an Avacyn. Like end of turn, flash in an Avacyn, untap, Angelic Purge, kill one of my guys that's going to die to Avacyn flipping anyway to kill your biggest guy, and then Avacyn flips, wipes out everything else. Can be a pretty powerful sequence. So Angelic Purge is just kind of there to kind of round things out. Also hits like enchantments and artifacts. So if there's a dangerous enchantment that I want to kill, I can have Angelic Purge. I can also kill something like a Sky Sovereign, which can be problematic. So just kind of round things out. For removal, I also have 3 Stasis Snares. They're mainly against the Saheeli combo decks because a lot of times with those decks, they'll wait until they have 6 mana and then play Felidar Guardian and Saheeli in the same turn. So you need an instant speed way to interact with them. Also against those decks, I have 1 Authority of the Consuls and 2 Thalia Heretic Cathar in my sideboard. Right now I'm playing 2 Tireless Tracker in the main. Before I had been playing 2 Thalia, and that's a switch that I made that I'm not super confident in.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a good idea, but mainly I just want the Thalias against the Saheeli combo decks, because if you have Thalia out, they can never combo off. Thalia's like a pretty good card in her own right. I also have 2 extra sweepers. I have a 2nd Fumigate in my sideboard and a Descend Upon the Sinful. So against the green-black deck, sweepers are really, really, really good. But they can have things like Scrap Heap Scrounger. I don't think it's likely, but they may have something like Heroic Intervention. So rather than playing 3 Fumigates, I decided to diversify and play Descend Upon the Sinful because it exiles. To note, I'm probably never going to have Delirium, so there is some extra text on Descend Upon the Sinful that could come into play, but it's pretty unlikely. And then also on my sideboard, just to kind of round out the top end, I have a Nissa Vital Force, and an Ajani Unyielding. Basically just two really good anti-control cards. Ajani Unyielding in particular is nice because it allows me to keep my draw as extremely threat dense, but I'm not going to fold to like a random Kalidas, sticking on my opponent's side of the board. So, and Nissa is just really aggressive, really powerful. And then if I need a little extra top end against a deck that's going to have me on the back foot, I have a Sky Sovereign console flagship, really good at attacking opposing planeswalkers. I think it's going to in particular be really good against Mardu vehicles. And then I also have a Linvala the Preserver against decks that are, actively attacking my life total, just in case I need a little more top end. So that basically like rounds things out in the sideboard. I feel like I'm pretty well prepared against everything, but I don't know. Anything can happen.
Well, thank you for showing us your deck, and best of luck.
Thanks a lot.
In the tournament, you're starting in an hour or so.
Yeah. I came for the player meeting, made sure I could buy my Heart of Kiran's, which were basically sold out everywhere. And I thought I wasn't even going to be able to register them, which would have been a nightmare. But yeah, I've got 2 buys, so I've got some time to kill, go get some breakfast, and then hopefully smash some face.
All right. Best of luck.
Thanks a lot.